On my first day at work, I found a photograph of my husband on my colleague's desk. I smiled and asked, "Who is this?" She replied with glowing pride, "That's my boyfriend. We've been together for 3 years, and we're planning to get married at the end of the year." On my first day at the new company, I had told myself I needed to keep my cool. Starting over at 32 isn't easy, but I believed in my capabilities. I'm Allison, the new senior marketing manager at a fast-growing tech firm in New York City called TechSphere. I had fought my way through countless corporate battles, handled multi-million-dollar contracts, and dealt with the most difficult personalities. I thought nothing in an office environment could ever throw me off balance. I was wrong. My desk was situated next to a frosted glass partition. On the other side sat a delicate-looking young woman. She had long, slightly wavy hair, flawless makeup, and gave off a subtle, expensive scent of perfume. She turned to me with a bright smile, a friendly gesture that easily won people over. "Are you Allison?" "I'm Maya, the project assistant for our team. Welcome to TechSphere." I smiled back and shook her hand. "Hi, Maya. Nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll make a great team." I said this while placing my designer tote on the chair and pulling out my MacBook. My head was already full of to-do lists. Review project scopes, check the quarterly budget, read through the marketing briefs, and schedule a team sync. But my eyes accidentally landed on Maya's desk. Not because of her beauty or her smile, but because of the picture frame sitting on the left corner of her desk. Right next to a small succulent, the silver frame was so pristine it caught the overhead light as if its owner polished it daily. And in that photograph was my husband. I wasn't mistaken. It was impossible to be mistaken. The man in the navy blue polo shirt, the familiar half-smile playing on his lips, the dimple on his left cheek, and those eyes looking straight into the camera with warmth and confidence. It was Michael. My husband, the man who, just last night, was standing in our kitchen making steak and roasted potatoes for me, who hugged me from behind and whispered, "Tomorrow is your big day. Knock 'em dead, honey." There was another detail in that photo that made my breath catch in my throat. The navy polo shirt he was wearing was the exact one I had bought him for our 3rd wedding anniversary. And if you looked closely, the background featured a crystal-clear blue ocean and leaning palm trees. It was the unmistakable landscape of Maui, Hawaii, where we had vacationed after I closed a massive marketing campaign. That photograph was supposed to be sitting on the nightstand in our bedroom. I knew that because I had framed it myself. But here it was, on the desk of a girl in my new office. The naked truth was lying right in front of me. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears, as if all the hot blood in my body had rushed to my head and then immediately drained down to my feet. I didn't collapse, but my knees felt weak. I had been through a lot in my life, but in that moment, I understood what it felt like when your entire world collapses in absolute silence. I didn't immediately start asking questions. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began typing meaningless words on my laptop as a defense mechanism. Then, I turned around, forcing my voice to sound as light and casual as any new employee making small talk. "Maya, who is that in the photo? He's handsome." Maya beamed. Her eyes sparkled, as if I had just brought up her absolute favorite topic in the world. She pulled the frame closer and gently traced her finger over the glass like it was a precious gem. "That's my boyfriend, Allison. His name is Michael. We've been together for 3 years. It's my favorite picture of him, so I brought it to the office for motivation. We're actually planning to get married around the holidays." I heard the words 3 years, and they hit me like a ton of bricks. 3 years. Michael and I had been married for 7. That meant starting from the 4th year of our marriage, he had been living a double life. I kept smiling. It was the smile of a woman accustomed to hiding her emotions behind a flawless layer of foundation. I smiled so perfectly that anyone watching would think I was just enjoying some polite office chatter. "So you're going to be a bride soon. Congratulations." "Yeah, I'm already getting nervous," Maya said, holding up her left hand. Under the fluorescent office lights, a diamond ring sparkled on her ring finger. It wasn't just a simple band. It was the kind of ring you immediately know costs a fortune. A large emerald-cut stone, sharp facets, reflecting light like a blade. He proposed last month. "Allison, he told me he wants to give me the wedding I deserve. We're looking at booking the ballroom at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, and I'm already dress shopping." My throat felt like sandpaper. Michael had once told me that he didn't like flashy things, that an engagement ring should be simple and understated because love isn't measured in diamonds. I had believed him back then. I wore a delicate, thin gold band that he said fit our minimalist aesthetic perfectly. I had even been proud of that simplicity. Now I realized it wasn't that he disliked luxury. He was just saving it for someone else. I forced myself to maintain an even tone. What does your fiancé do? He's in investment banking. Things have been going incredibly well for him lately. He's always slammed with work, so he works late a lot, but he takes such good care of me. I repeated the name in my head. Michael Davis, my husband, the man who had told me just yesterday that he was swamped with a new portfolio this week and would be coming home late. The man who had kissed my forehead this morning before leaving the apartment. I heard my own voice asking the next question. Still steady, laced with just the right amount of polite curiosity. Where did you two meet? At an industry conference. He was a guest speaker, and I made the first move to ask for his LinkedIn, Maya said, giggling like a teenager, recounting a fairy tale. He was so guarded at first, but I was persistent, and he finally caved. He told me I was the one who finally made him want to settle down. The word settle down felt like a cruel, twisted joke. I was his wife, the person he had chosen to build a life with, bound by a marriage certificate. I blinked once, just once, to hold back the stinging tears. My mind raced through all the times he had used late meetings as an excuse, the texts saying he was stuck at the office, the weekends he claimed he had to fly out for sudden due diligence trips. I used to complain a little, but I stopped because I trusted him. I trusted him the way I trusted that our apartment wouldn't spontaneously catch on fire. Suddenly, Maya looked at me and asked a question that felt like it ripped my heart out. Are you married, Allison? I glanced back at the photo on her desk. Michael's smile in the picture was the exact same smile he gave me. It turned out that smile could be divided by 2, or even 3, and still look completely whole and genuine. I answered without changing my expression. Yes. I've been married for 7 years. Maya's eyes widened slightly, and she let out a soft laugh, as if hearing about some ancient history. Wow, 7 years. That's a long time. Your relationship must be so calm and settled by now. I've read that people get easily bored with each other after the 7-year itch. She said it without any malice, but every word felt like a paper cut slicing into my skin. I wasn't mad at her. I was mad at the cruel joke the universe was playing, putting me in this exact situation. This girl knew nothing, innocently rambling about the 7-year itch, while I sat in the middle of a corporate open-plan office, forced to flawlessly execute the performance of a lifetime. I nodded, offering a tight, bitter smile. Stability. That's a kind of happiness, too. The most important things are respect and loyalty. Exactly, Maya chirped, turning back to her dual monitors. I turned back to my laptop. On the screen was a project timeline, budget spreadsheets, and action items. But my brain could no longer process the words. Something inside me had clicked into gear, like a cold, highly efficient machine suddenly powering on. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't grab the picture frame and smash it to pieces. I simply sat up straight, placed both hands on the keyboard, and pressed my manicured nails into my palms until it hurt. One thought echoed in my mind. I need to uncover the whole truth. A few moments later, an administrative assistant walked by and tapped on my cubicle wall. Allison? Steve is asking for you in the main conference room for a quick project huddle. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Sure. I'll be right there. I stepped out from behind my desk and walked past Maya's workspace. She was typing away, occasionally glancing at the photograph and smiling. A smile of pure, untainted happiness that sent a shiver down my spine. I walked toward the elevators, catching my reflection in the polished steel doors. My charcoal-tailored blazer fit perfectly. My hair was pulled back into a sleek, low bun. My lipstick was a dark, confident shade, and my eyeliner was sharp. I looked like a successful Manhattan executive stepping into a brilliant new chapter of her life. No one would ever guess that just a few minutes ago, my entire reality had been shredded by a single framed photograph. As the elevator doors closed, I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart was pounding, but not in a panicked rhythm. It felt like a drumbeat of war, warning me. Don't break. Don't show weakness. Don't lose control. For 7 years, I had lived in a marriage I believed was my safe harbor. If Michael was capable of meticulously building a second life behind my back, then I was capable of building a plan of my own. I didn't know exactly where this plan would take me yet, but one thing was certain. As of this moment, I was no longer the naive wife who believed in late nights at the office. I was a woman who was going to dig up every dirty secret and take back what belonged to me. And I was going to start right here, in this very company. The first meeting at my new job felt like watching a movie in slow motion. I sat near the head of the conference table. On the screen were Q3 market projections. Surrounding me were the faces of my new colleagues, discussing ad spend, media outreach, and rollout strategies. I nodded, took notes on my iPad, and interjected with sharp, professional insights at the perfect moments to ensure everyone believed I was entirely focused. But in reality, my mind wasn't in that room. The image of the photograph on Maya's desk kept flashing behind my eyes. We've been together for 3 years. 3 years. That number was a massive crack, spider-webbing across the foundation of my 7-year marriage, blurring everything I thought I knew. When the meeting wrapped up, the room cleared out. Steve, the VP of marketing, lingered behind. He gave me an approving nod. You catch on fast, Allie. I know you were dealing with massive accounts back in Chicago, but NYC is a different beast. You handled that perfectly. I smiled gracefully. Thanks, Steve. I'm hoping to integrate with the team as seamlessly as possible. Steve chuckled. It's a young team, but they hustle. By the way, we've got a new investment consultant coming in soon from one of our partner firms. This guy is a heavy hitter. You'll probably be interfacing with him quite a bit on the upcoming fintech launch. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was standard corporate synergy, but politely asked, when is he arriving? Sometime next week, probably. I haven't met him face to face yet, just heard great things from the board. I nodded and left the conference room. Once I was in the hallway, I realized I was gripping my iPad so tightly my knuckles were white. I relaxed my hands and took a deep, shaky breath. My mind now had one singular objective: verification. Not because I wanted to cling to some pathetic hope that this was all a misunderstanding. I knew what I saw, but I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. Walking back to my desk, I saw Maya typing briskly. The photo stood silently on the corner of her desk, oblivious to the fact that it had just nuked another woman's life. I sat down and opened my laptop, though my eyes kept darting in her direction. Maya caught my gaze and smiled warmly. Allison, a bunch of us usually grab lunch at this great artisanal sandwich spot a few blocks down. Do you want to come with us? I forced a nod. Yeah, that sounds great. Count me in. While waiting for the lunch hour, I pretended to read over SEO reports, but my fingers opened a new browser tab, Instagram. I typed in Michael Davis. His profile popped up instantly. His profile picture was a shot of us from 2 years ago during a wine tasting trip to Napa Valley. I stared at it for a few seconds. In the photo, I was leaning into his shoulder, laughing genuinely. At that time, I believed the man beside me was my rock for the rest of my life. I scrolled down. Most of his recent posts were strictly professional. Pictures from networking events, panels, quotes about venture capital, no trace of any other romantic relationships. I wasn't surprised. Michael had always been incredibly disciplined and private online. But a photo posted 2 months ago caught my eye. He was standing on a stage at a financial summit in Dallas. Hundreds of attendees were seated in the audience. I checked the comments. Right near the top, full of heart eyes and clapping emojis, was an account named Maya Jenkins. So proud of you. Absolute visionary. I stared at the screen. In the picture, Michael was wearing a sharp tailored suit. The stage lights illuminated his confident jawline. I remembered that week clearly. He had told me he needed to fly to Dallas to court some high-net-worth clients. I had even packed his suitcase and reminded him to take his vitamins because his schedule was so grueling. It turned out he was there, on that stage, standing in front of a crowd, while his mistress sat in the audience gazing up at him with utter adoration. A wave of cold clarity washed over me. It wasn't jealousy. It was a realization that this affair wasn't a drunken mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was calculated. It was built over time, methodically. Right out in the open. My iPhone buzzed on my desk. A text from Michael. How's the first day going, beautiful? I stared at the glowing letters. If he had sent this in the morning, I probably would have replied immediately with a bunch of emojis. Now, it felt like an insult to my intelligence. I typed back a brief response. Going well. Great team. he replied instantly. Glad to hear it. I'm going to be home late tonight. Client dinner. I glared at the screen. Client dinner. Those two words had suddenly taken on a sickeningly heavy meaning. I typed back slowly. Okay, don't work too hard. That was it. No follow-up questions, no complaining. I set the phone face down. At exactly noon, our pod headed out for lunch. The sandwich shop was located in a bustling alleyway not far from the office, all exposed brick and the smell of toasted sourdough. Everyone chatted loudly over the noise. I joined in, making polite conversation. But my radar was entirely locked on Maya. She was a natural storyteller, laughing often, and frequently dropping Michael's name into the conversation with a humble brag tone. He's just so crazy busy, she said, taking a bite of her salad. Being in VC means he's constantly chasing term sheets, but he still makes time to surprise me. One of the designers teased her. You are so spoiled, Maya. Your future husband is loaded. Maya blushed, waving a hand dismissively. He told me that once we're married, we're buying our own place. He's already been looking at penthouses in Hudson Yards. I held my fork, my hand freezing in midair for a fraction of a second. Hudson Yards. Michael had recently mentioned to me that we should consider diversifying our portfolio by investing in a luxury condo in Hudson Yards, ostensibly to rent out as a passive income stream. I had agreed, thinking it was a smart financial move. Maya continued, her eyes dreamy. He says it's a man's job to provide a sanctuary for his family. It just makes me feel so secure, you know? I swallowed a bite of my turkey club. It tasted like ash. I looked at the young woman across from me. She had no idea she was the supporting actress in a deeply twisted psychological thriller. To her, this man was Prince Charming. After lunch, we returned to the office. Walking past her desk, I saw the photo again. This time, I wasn't shocked. Instead, a new emotion settled in my chest. Absolute, steely resolve. I opened my laptop and got to work. But while everyone thought I was drafting marketing copy, I had opened a hidden, password-protected spreadsheet. I started logging the data, names, the 3-year timeline, the Dallas conference, the Hudson Yards apartment. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle. The day flew by. At 5:30 p.m., people started packing up. Bye, everyone, Maya grabbed her purse. Allison, which way are you heading? Taking the subway? I'm going to grab an Uber, I replied smoothly. Okay, see you tomorrow, I nodded. Stepping out of the glass building, the late afternoon sun was reflecting off the Manhattan skyscrapers. The streets were packed with yellow cabs and commuters. I stood on the corner waiting for my ride when my phone vibrated again. Michael was calling. I answered. Hey, honey, his smooth voice came through the speaker. I'm heading to meet the clients now. Go ahead and eat dinner without me. I watched the sea of traffic in front of me, keeping my voice perfectly flat. All right, he chuckled softly. You must be exhausted from your first day. Get some rest. See you tonight. The call ended. I stood there, a razor-sharp thought crystallizing in my mind. If he could manage a 3-year double life, what I discovered today was just the tip of the iceberg. I climbed into the back of my Uber. As the car navigated the gridlock, I opened my contacts and scrolled down to one specific name. Sarah, attorney. I stared at her name for a long moment before locking the screen. I knew I didn't need to rush this, but I also knew that from this minute on, I was in data collection mode. Evidence, timelines, bank statements, everything. Because if my marriage was built on a lie, I sure as hell wasn't walking away empty-handed. My story was just beginning. The Uber pulled up to our luxury high-rise in Brooklyn Heights just as it got dark. The warm, ambient lighting of the lobby spilled out onto the pavement, making it look like the idyllic home of a perfect, successful couple. I paid the driver and walked inside. The doorman recognized me and tipped his hat. Good evening, Mrs. Davis. Early night? I nodded. Yes, George. Just a bit tired. First day at the new job. The elevator took me up to the 20th floor. When I unlocked the door to our condo, the familiar scent of our home, a mix of sandalwood diffusers and expensive leather, felt suffocating. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The gray mid-century modern sofa I had picked out, the heavy oak dining table Michael loved, and the beautiful oil painting of a countryside landscape we bought during a weekend getaway to the Hudson Valley. A home built over 7 years of shared history. Every object held a memory, but looking at them now, I felt no warmth. Only question marks. I dropped my bag on the console table, kicked off my heels, and walked into the kitchen. Out of habit, I opened the stainless steel fridge to figure out dinner, but then I stopped. Client dinner. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. The word client was doing a lot of heavy lifting these days. I shut the fridge, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, and sat on the sofa. My phone was in my hand. Half of me wanted to scour Maya's social media again. The other half wanted to rip apart Michael's home office to find a smoking gun. But I restrained myself. Acting on pure adrenaline would lead to mistakes. I needed to be calculating. Around 8:00 p.m., my phone buzzed. Wrapping up here, probably be home after 10. I stared at the text, then stood up and walked into our master bedroom. The nightstand on his side of the bed had a bottom drawer where he kept personal documents. I slid it open. Inside was his passport, some old lease agreements, and a small Moleskine notebook. I flipped through the notebook, just scribbled meeting notes and stock tickers. Nothing suspicious. I closed it and moved to his walk-in closet. His dress shirts and quarter zips hung in immaculate rows. I ran my hand along the fabrics until I stopped at a dark charcoal gray tailored suit. I recognized it. It was the suit he wore in the photo from the Dallas conference. The same photo Maya had commented on. I checked the interior pockets. My fingers brushed against a piece of crumpled paper. A receipt. It was from an exclusive, highly rated omakase sushi restaurant in Hudson Yards. The date was from 3 weeks ago. And the total with tip was just over $350. I stared at the thermal paper, my memory jogging back. 3 weeks ago. That was the night Michael told me he was taking a prospective VP out for a boring, drawn-out dinner. I had asked if I should wait up. He had told me, "Don't bother, it's going to be endless shop talk." I sat on the edge of the plush king-sized bed, clutching the receipt. 3 years. That was a long time to hide in plain sight. It meant there were hundreds of nights. Just like this one. I unlocked my phone and went back to Maya's Instagram. This time, I didn't just skim. I zoomed in on her travel photos, the aesthetic brunch shots, the romantic, vague captions. She never tagged him, but the breadcrumbs were there. A man's Rolex resting on a marble coffee table, the exact Submariner I bought him for his 35th birthday. A picture of 2 wine glasses clinking. In the corner of the frame, a man's left hand rested on the table. The gold band on his ring finger was unmistakable. Our wedding ring. I tossed the phone onto the duvet and let out a long, shaky breath. No more room for doubt. He wasn't just having a fling. He was actively maintaining 2 entirely separate realities. At around 10:30 p.m., I heard the electronic lock click open. Michael walked in, taking off his trench coat. He hung it up and spotted me sitting on the living room sofa with a book. "You're still up?" I didn't look up immediately. "Just waiting for you." He smiled, walking over and placing a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. "How was day 1?" I looked up, meeting his eyes. "It was fine." He nodded and walked to the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. I watched his every move. The way he opened the fridge, the way he drank, the way he loosened his tie. All so incredibly familiar. But I was watching a stranger now. When he came back, I asked the most mundane question possible. "Who was the client tonight?" Without missing a beat, he replied, "A group of venture capitalists from Singapore. They're looking to partner up on a new fintech incubator we're launching." He spoke so smoothly, without a single micro-expression of guilt. I nodded, not pushing it. Before today, I would have taken his word as gospel. Now, I saw the sociopathic ease with which he lied. He sat next to me, draping an arm around my shoulders. "You look exhausted, Allie. Let's go to bed." I stared at him for a second. The image of Maya, blushing and bragging about her fiancé, flashed in my mind. 2 women. One legally bound to him, the other picking out a wedding dress. And this man was comfortably wedged between the 2. I stood up. "Yeah, I'm going to sleep." I went into the bathroom. shut the door, and listened to the shower running. I stared at the ceiling. My brain was firing on all cylinders. I had two choices. Option A: walk out right now, scream in his face, throw the sushi receipt at him, and turn our beautiful condo into a war zone. Option B: play the long game. Gather the intel. Track the assets. 30 minutes later, Michael climbed into bed next to me. He turned off the bedside lamp and wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me against his chest, just like he did every single night. Night, honey. I closed my eyes. But in the dark, I was wide awake. I was mentally mapping out tomorrow. I would start with the money. Joint accounts, credit card statements, the client dinners. Because if Michael had the patience to lie for 3 years, I had the patience to build an airtight case. And when the bomb finally dropped, I would be the one holding the detonator. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The New York skyline outside our window was still painted in a hazy pre-dawn gray. Michael was dead asleep beside me, his breathing rhythmic, his arm draped heavily over my hip. To anyone else, it was a picture-perfect modern marriage. But I carefully slid his arm off, got out of bed, and walked to the master bathroom. My reflection in the mirror looked composed, but my eyes were darker, sharper. I splashed freezing water on my face, shocking myself fully awake. When I walked back into the bedroom, Michael was sitting up, rubbing his face. "You're up early, babe." I nodded. "I want to get to the office early to prep for a strategy meeting." He threw off the covers, walked over, and kissed the top of my head. His daily routine. "How was yesterday, really?" "Standard onboarding stuff." He smiled and walked into the closet. I stood there, watching him pull a crisp white dress shirt off a hanger. Every action he took was now data to me. "I've got a heavy schedule today," he called out from the closet. "Might be late again tonight." "Okay," I said easily. He didn't notice the absolute lack of emotion in my voice. After 3 years of unquestioned loyalty, he had grown complacent. We ate breakfast at the kitchen island. Michael scrolled through the Wall Street Journal app on his phone while eating his eggs. I noticed a subtle smirk cross his face. "Good news in the markets?" I asked casually, sipping my black coffee. He glanced up. "Oh yeah, just some tech stocks rebounding." He stood up to put his plate in the dishwasher, leaving his phone face up on the marble counter. The screen lit up with an iMessage notification. The sender was Maya. The preview text was brief. "Can't wait for tonight." 21 stared at the words for 3 seconds before he turned back around. My heart didn't race this time. A chilling numbness washed over me. Michael picked up his phone, slipped it into his suit pocket, and grabbed his briefcase. "All right, I'm off. Have a good one." When the door locked behind him, the silence of the apartment felt heavy. A text from Maya. Lies about tonight's meetings. The constant client dinners. I pulled out my own phone and read his text from last night again. Client dinner. It was a script he had perfected. Half an hour later, I was on the subway heading to the office. My mind was a steel trap. I had the emotional confirmation, but I needed the financial paper trail. When I walked into the marketing department, Maya was already at her desk, organizing some mood boards. She looked radiant. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Good morning, Allison." "Morning, Maya." I put my bag down and booted up my iMac. Almost immediately, Maya spun her chair toward me. "Allison." Michael took me to this incredible omakase place in Hudson Yards last night. It was unbelievable. I paused my typing and looked at her. "Oh, really?" "Yeah." He said we hadn't had a proper date night in a while, so he wanted to spoil me. I offered a tight, polite smile. "How sweet." She giggled. "He really is." I turned back to my monitor, remembering the sushi receipt from 3 weeks ago. Clearly, Hudson Yards was his go-to playground. The morning was a blur of Zoom calls and email threads. But around noon, Maya stood up and grabbed her wallet. "I'm doing a coffee run. Do you want your iced cold brew?" "Yes, please. Thank you." The second Maya stepped onto the elevator, my eyes darted to her desk. She had left her phone sitting next to her keyboard. The screen suddenly lit up. A text from Michael. I couldn't read the whole thing, just the preview bubble. Slammed this afternoon? I'll pick you up outside your building at. I quickly looked back at my screen as a coworker walked past. A few minutes later, Maya returned, placing my iced coffee on my desk. Here you go, thanks. I watched out of the corner of my eye as she sat down, tapped her phone screen, and smiled so widely it reached her eyes. It was a bizarre sensation. I wasn't jealous anymore. I just felt an icy, terrifying clarity. At 5:00 p.m., I purposely dawdled, organizing my desk drawers. At 5:15, Maya packed up. Bye, Allison. Have a good night. You too. I waited 3 minutes, grabbed my coat, and took the service elevator down to the lobby. I exited the building and blended into a group of people standing near a food truck across the street. I pulled out my phone, pretending to text, but kept my eyes on the entrance of our building. Sure enough, Maya was standing on the curb, looking up and down the avenue expectantly. 5 minutes later, a sleek black Audi pulled up. Michael's car. He stepped out, wearing that crisp white shirt, keys in hand, sporting that damn charming smile. Maya practically skipped over to him and threw her arms around his neck. He leaned down, said something that made her laugh, and opened the passenger door for her. I was standing less than 50 feet away. I watched my husband drive away with my coworker. All residual doubts evaporated. The reality was raw and undeniable. I didn't take the subway home. I hailed a cab and told the driver to head to the West Village. I needed to see Sarah. Sarah and I had been roommates at NYU. She was now a ruthless family law and asset protection attorney. When I walked into the dimly lit wine bar we frequented, she was already sitting in a corner booth, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir. She looked up, noting my expression immediately. Allie, you called an emergency summit. What's going on? I slid into the leather booth. The waiter placed a glass of wine in front of me. I stared at the dark red liquid and said, Sarah, Michael is having an affair. Sarah froze. The lawyer in her instantly took over. She set her glass down, her eyes narrowing. Are you absolutely positive? It's not just an affair, I said, my voice steady. It's a full-blown second life. 3 years. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intense whisper. Walk me through it. Everything. I told her. The first day at the new job, the framed photo on Maya's desk, the engagement ring, the client meetings, the Dallas conference, and the Audi picking her up outside my office an hour ago. Sarah listened in absolute silence. She didn't offer pity or shock. When I finished, she let out a slow exhale. 3 years, not a day less. Sarah looked me dead in the eye. What's the play, Allie? I traced the rim of my wine glass. I don't know exactly yet, but when I detonate this, I am not walking away with half of what I deserve. I want everything. Sarah nodded slowly. Assets, real estate, brokerage accounts. You built this wealth together. If he's been funding a second life with marital assets, we are going to bury him. She reached into her Prada tote and pulled out a legal pad and a Mont Blanc pen. In New York, infidelity doesn't automatically mean you get all the money. But dissipation of marital assets is a massive weapon. If he used joint funds on her, a judge will force him to reimburse the marital estate dollar for dollar. Proof, I said. Exactly, Sarah replied cleanly. Suspicions and Instagram photos are good, but bank statements are bulletproof. You need to track 3 things immediately. The money, the timeline, and the cohabitation evidence. I've already started a spreadsheet. Sarah smiled, a predatory, proud grin. God, I love you. You're handling this better than 90% of my clients. The initial shock burned off. I said softly, now it's just logistics. Does the girl know? Sarah asked. I shook my head. No. She thinks he's her knight in shining armor. She thinks they're getting married. Sarah sighed. Then she's a victim of his fraud too. But listen to me carefully, Allie. Do not confront him yet. Do not act weird. If he suspects you know, he will start moving money into offshore accounts or crypto, and it will cost us tens of thousands in forensic accounting to find it. I'll play the loving wife. Good. Sarah closed her notepad. Get me the financials. When you're ready to pull the trigger, I'll have the divorce petition drafted and ready to serve. By the time I got back to Brooklyn Heights, it was almost 11:00 p.m. Michael wasn't home yet. I turned on the lights, went straight to the home office, and fired up my MacBook. I opened my encrypted Excel file and began formalizing the data. Date. Location. The lie told, the reality. It was a mosaic of betrayal. 30 minutes later, the front door opened. Michael walked in, loosening his tie, looking genuinely fatigued. "You're still up?" I looked up from the screen. "Yeah. Finishing up some marketing analytics." He dropped his leather briefcase on a chair. "Brutal day. Back-to-back pitches." "Really?" I asked mildly. He walked into the master bathroom. I watched his retreating back, Sarah's words echoing in my head. The money. The timeline. The evidence. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a chess match. And I was 2 moves ahead. The next morning, I woke up to find Michael already gone. A sticky note was left on the kitchen counter in his familiar scrawl. "Early tea time with a client. Have a great day, beautiful. Grab a coffee on me." Attached was a $20 bill. I stared at the money. A week ago, I would have thought it was a sweet gesture. Today, it felt like hush money. I made my own coffee and sat down at the kitchen island. I opened my laptop. It was Saturday, which meant I had time to dig into the financials. Our primary joint checking and savings accounts were at Chase. Because Michael was the finance guy, I usually let him manage the big picture while my paycheck automatically deposited into the joint. I rarely scrutinized the line items. Today, I downloaded the last 24 months of PDF statements. I started scanning. Mortgage payments. Con Ed. Whole Foods. Equinox memberships. All normal. Then, I scrolled back to 3 months ago. A Zelle transfer caught my eye. Amount: $3,000. Recipient: Maya Jenkins. My blood ran cold. I kept scrolling. 2 months ago, $2,500. Recipient: M. Jenkins. I hit Ctrl+F and searched Jenkins. The screen lit up with yellow highlights. Every month. Sometimes twice a month. $1,000 here, $2,000 there. Venmo payments, wire transfers. I felt sick. He wasn't just buying her dinners. He was subsidizing her life. I updated my spreadsheet. Date. Amount. Recipient. By the time I tallied up the last year alone, the total transfers to Maya exceeded $35,000. I stared at the sum. That was our money. Money I had worked 6 0-hour weeks for. I texted Sarah. Just found over $35K in direct transfers to her from our joint account. Sarah called me within 10 seconds. Are you serious? Yes. Take screenshots. Download the PDFs. Email them to a secure brand new Gmail account he doesn't know about, she ordered. This is textbook marital waste. We're going to nail him to the wall. I'm doing it now. Stay frosty, Allie. I spent the next 2 hours securing the digital evidence. By noon, I was dressed and ready to leave the apartment. Just as I was putting on my coat, Michael called. Hey, babe. Golf ran long. I'm grabbing lunch with the guys. Might be out till later this afternoon. I looked at my laptop, where his financial infidelity was permanently documented. That's fine. I'm running some errands anyway. Sounds good. Love you. I hung up without saying it back. Monday morning at the office, Maya practically floated to her desk. She was carrying a massive shopping bag from Bergdorf Goodman. Allison! Look! She squealed, pulling out a sleek black box. Inside was a pair of Jimmy Choo stilettos. They were stunning. Wow, I said, keeping my face neutral. Those are gorgeous. Maya beamed. Michael bought them for me over the weekend. We went shopping on Fifth Avenue. I nodded, returning to my monitor. I logged into my personal Chase app, checking our shared credit card activity from Saturday. There it was. Bergdorf Goodman, $895. Everything aligned so perfectly it was almost comical. Later that week, during a team brainstorm, Maya leaned over to me. Allison, remember that apartment in Hudson Yards I mentioned? Michael and I are going to tour the model units tonight. Really? That's a huge step. I know. He says a man needs to secure the castle before bringing home the queen. I wanted to vomit, but instead I smiled. I hope it's everything you want. I remembered seeing a massive outgoing wire transfer on our joint account a week ago. $50,000 to a real estate escrow firm. The earnest money. That evening, I left work 15 minutes early. I walked across the street and stood inside a Starbucks, ordering a green tea, watching the tech building's lobby through the window. Right at 5:30, Maya walked out. A few minutes later, Michael's Audi pulled up. She got in. I walked a block over to where I had parked my SUV. I pulled out into the chaotic Manhattan traffic, keeping 2 cars between myself and Michael's Audi. He drove west, heading straight for the gleaming, ultra-modern glass towers of Hudson Yards. He pulled into a valet circle. I parked down the street at a meter and walked toward the luxury sales gallery. The building was a masterpiece of modern architecture, overlooking the Hudson River. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the showroom, I saw them. Michael and Maya were standing over a scale model of the high-rise. A sharply dressed real estate broker was pointing to a penthouse tier. Maya had her hands clasped together, looking up at Michael with sheer adoration. Michael had his arm wrapped securely around her waist. I stood behind a decorative concrete planter on the sidewalk, 50 feet away. It was a bizarre, out-of-body experience. 7 years ago, Michael and I had stood in a leasing office in Brooklyn, arguing over paint colors and agonizing over a down payment. He had promised me that apartment would be our forever home. Now, he was recreating that exact milestone with a woman 10 years younger. I didn't storm in. I pulled out my iPhone, zoomed in, and took 5 crystal-clear photos of them with the broker, his arm around her, acting very much like a married couple. I walked back to my car, the cold wind off the Hudson hitting my face. Michael thought he was a master architect building a secret empire. He had no idea I held the blueprints. By the time I got home, I had uploaded the photos to the secure drive, added a new tab to my spreadsheet. Real estate. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended reality. I went to work. I sat next to the mistress. I went home. I ate dinner with the cheating husband. It was a flawless, terrifying performance. On Wednesday, Maya leaned over my cubicle wall. "Allison, do you have a second?" "Sure, what's up? Could you look over this pitch deck?" Michael asked me to review the marketing language for his new venture capital firm. My ears perked up. His new firm? Yeah, he's spinning off to start his own boutique fund. If he secures the seed capital, it's going to be massive. She proudly emailed me the PDF. I opened the deck. The logo on the title slide read, Apex Capital Partners. I scrolled through the executive summary, the market analysis, the financial projections. Then I hit the corporate structuring slide. Managing Partner.es, CEO, Michael Davis. Partner, Director of Operations, Maya Jenkins. 20% equity stake. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice water. This wasn't just an affair. This was corporate embezzlement of our marriage. He was using joint assets to seed a new business, and he was giving his mistress 20% equity. I looked up at Maya. This looks very comprehensive. He must really trust you to bring you on as a partner. She flipped her hair proudly. He says, I'm his lucky charm. We're going to build an empire together. That night, I didn't go home right away. I took an Uber to the address listed on the Apex Capital pitch deck. It was a sleek co-working space in Midtown. I walked in, pretending to look for a friend, and peered through the glass walls of the private suites. In Suite 4B, I saw them. Michael and Maya were sitting across a conference table from 2 older men in expensive suits, clearly investors. Michael was pitching. Maya was nodding, taking notes, playing the supportive business partner. I turned around and walked out. The final puzzle piece had snapped into place. Back at our apartment, I stood on the balcony overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. The city was glowing. I called Sarah. He's starting a new firm, I said into the phone. Apex Capital. He gave her 20% equity. I guarantee you the seed money came from the bad investments he told me our portfolio took a hit on last quarter. Sarah cursed under her breath. Son of a bitch. That's it, Allie. We have the paper trail. We have the infidelity. We have the dissipation of assets. I'm drafting the papers. Good. When do you want him served? I looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Oh, I'm not going to serve him at home. That's too quiet. What are you thinking? Thursday afternoon, I said slowly. Maya told me today that Apex Capital is hosting a massive investor launch mixer at the St. Regis Hotel on Friday night. He's officially introducing the company. And her. Sarah laughed, a dark, thrilled sound. You're going to crash it. I'm going to burn it to the ground. Thursday evening, Michael came home looking stressed but energized. He opened his laptop on the dining table. Busy week? I asked, pouring myself a glass of Chardonnay. Yeah, big networking event tomorrow night. I'm trying to lock down some angel investors for a side project. Oh? Where is it? He didn't look up. Just a boring mixer at the St. Regis. Nothing you'd enjoy. I took a sip of my wine. Well, good luck. Thanks, babe. Friday arrived. The atmosphere in the TechSphere office was buzzing. Maya spent half the day online shopping and doing her makeup in the restroom. Allison, she said, applying a fresh coat of lip gloss at her desk. What do you think? The white silk slip dress or the navy cocktail dress for tonight? The white one, I said without missing a beat. It's very elegant. Perfect for a co-founder, she squealed. You're the best. I'm leaving early to get a blowout. Have fun. Once she left, I finished my reports, closed my laptop, and took a deep breath. At 4:00 p.m., I left the office. I didn't go home. I went straight to Bergdorf Goodman. I bought a stunning, form-fitting black Tom Ford dress that cost more than my first car. I went to a high-end salon on the Upper East Side and had my hair blown out into sleek, aggressive waves. My makeup artist gave me a sharp, smoky eye and a bold red lip. When I looked in the mirror, the woman looking back wasn't the accommodating, trusting wife from a month ago. She was an executioner. At 7:30 p.m., I pulled up to the street. Regis Hotel in a black Uber SUV. I stepped out into the crisp New York air, handed the driver a $50 tip, and walked through the gilded brass revolving doors. The lobby was dripping in crystal chandeliers and old money. I checked the event board. Apex Capital Partners, Astor Suite. I walked up the grand staircase. The heavy mahogany doors to the Astor Suite were propped open. Inside, a jazz trio was playing softly. Waiters in white coats circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. There were about 40 people in the room, wealthy venture capitalists, bankers, and industry elites. At the front of the room, standing in front of a sleek banner bearing the Apex Capital logo, was Michael. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He looked like $1,000,000, and right beside him, holding a champagne flute, wearing the white silk dress, was Maya. She was clinging to his arm, laughing at something an older investor was saying. I paused at the entrance for 5 seconds. A hostess approached me with an iPad. Name, Miss Allison Davis, I said clearly. She scrolled. I don't see I'm the CEO's wife, I said smoothly. Her eyes widened, and she stepped aside. My apologies, Mrs. Davis. Please, go right in. I walked into the room. My heels clicked rhythmically against the marble floor. I grabbed a glass of champagne off a passing tray. At first, no one noticed me. I glided through the crowd, nodding politely to a few men in suits. Then, Michael turned his head. His eyes locked onto mine. I have never in my entire life seen the color drain from a human being's face so rapidly. His jaw slackened. The charming smile completely vanished. His hand, holding his Scotch glass, visibly trembled. I offered a chilling, perfectly poised smile and walked straight toward him. The conversation around him naturally died down as people noticed the sudden tension radiating from the host. Maya turned, following his gaze. When she saw me, her brow furrowed in deep confusion. Allison, what are you doing here? I stopped 3 feet away from them. I looked at Maya, then shifted my gaze to my husband. Michael, you didn't tell me we were hosting an event tonight. You aren't going to introduce me? Dead silence fell over their immediate circle. Michael swallowed hard. Allie. What are you? Maya looked from me to Michael. Michael, why is she calling you her husband? I didn't let him speak. I turned to Maya, my voice carrying clearly over the soft jazz music. Because I am his wife, Maya. We've been married for 7 years. We live in Brooklyn Heights. Maya's face went paper white. She dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the marble floor, the sharp crash echoing through the suddenly silent Astor Suite. The jazz trio awkwardly stopped playing. Every head in the room turned toward us. Michael lunged forward, grabbing my elbow. Allie, stop. Let's step outside. Right now. I yanked my arm out of his grip with enough force to make him stumble. Don't touch me. An older man with silver hair, the lead investor they had been courting, stepped forward, looking deeply uncomfortable. Michael, is there a problem here? Michael was sweating. No. Richard, this is just a personal misunderstanding. My wife is just leaving. Oh, I'm not leaving, I said, projecting my voice so the entire room could hear. I actually came to introduce myself to the board. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Davis, Michael's wife of 7 years. Murmurs erupted through the crowd. Men in expensive suits exchanged bewildered glances. I turned back to the crowd, pulling a folded manila envelope from my clutch. I know you're all here evaluating Apex Capital for your portfolios, but before you write any checks, due diligence is key, right? You should probably know that the seed money for this firm and the $50,000 escrow deposit for the CEO's new Hudson Yards penthouse was embezzled from our joint marital accounts without my consent. The room erupted into shocked whispers. Richard, the lead investor, frowned deeply, setting his drink down. Is this true, Michael? Michael looked like he was going to vomit. Richard, please, it's not what it looks like. He also, I continued, my voice slicing through his pathetic defense, gave 20% equity of this company to his mistress, who he's been lying to for 3 years. I looked at Maya. She was physically shaking, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. She looked at Michael, her voice a fragile, broken whisper. You said you were single. You promised me. Maya, baby, please. Let me explain. Michael stammered, reaching for her. She slapped his hand away, sobbing. Don't touch me. You're married? I'm filing for a forensic audit of Apex Capital on Monday, I announced to the room, locking eyes with the investors. Any funds commingled with his fraudulent accounts will be frozen by the state of New York during our divorce proceedings. I highly suggest you hold on to your checkbooks. Richard shook his head in disgust. This is a circus. Michael, our firm is out. Good luck. He turned and walked toward the exit. Like a domino effect, the other investors began putting down their drinks and heading for the doors. Nobody wanted their money tied up in a messy, fraudulent divorce lawsuit. Michael stood in the center of the collapsing room, his empire crumbling in real time. He looked at me, his eyes full of pure, unadulterated panic and rage. You destroyed everything. I stepped in close, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper, meant only for him. No, Michael. You built a house of cards. I just opened the window. Maya pushed past him, sobbing hysterically as she ran out of the suite, the white silk dress fluttering behind her. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel anything for him at all. I turned my back on my husband, walked out of the Astor Suite, and didn't look back. The lobby of the St. Regis was quiet. My heels clicked on the marble as I walked out the revolving doors, and into the cool Manhattan night, I flagged down a yellow cab. As the taxi drove downtown, my phone started blowing up. Missed calls from Michael. Texts begging me to talk. I powered the phone down and tossed it into my purse. When I unlocked the door to our Brooklyn Heights condo, the silence greeted me like an old friend. The heavy, suffocating weight I had been carrying for weeks was completely gone. I poured myself a glass of water, kicked off the expensive stilettos, and walked out onto the balcony. The New York City skyline glittered across the East River. Millions of lights, millions of lives, 7 years of marriage, 3 years of lies, and it only took 20 minutes to burn it to the ground. Around 1:00 a.m., I heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps crossed the hardwood floor. Michael stepped out onto the balcony. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his bow tie was undone, and he looked defeated, exhausted, and broken. He stood a few feet away from me. The silence between us stretched for a long time. Did you really have to do it like that? His voice was hoarse, hollow. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the city. Did you really have to spend our savings on another woman's Jimmy Choos? He ran a hand through his hair. I was going to tell you, Allie. I swear to God. I didn't know how to end things. I was trapped. I let out a soft, dry laugh. You weren't trapped, Michael. You were greedy. You wanted the loyal wife at home and the shiny new startup girl in the city. You wanted to play God with both of our lives. He stepped closer, his voice cracking. Allie, I'm so sorry. Please. I finally turned to look at him. The man I had loved for 7 years was gone. In his place was just a pathetic stranger in a ruined suit. My lawyer is Sarah, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. She'll be serving you the papers on Monday. Do not try to hide the money. She already has copies of every wire transfer, the escrow documents for Hudson Yards, and the Apex Capital Incorporation papers. If you fight me on the assets, she will destroy you in open court. Michael stared at me, realizing in that moment that he had completely underestimated the woman he married. He slowly nodded. No arguing. No begging. The fight was already over. He walked back inside the dark apartment, leaving me alone on the balcony. The wind off the river was cold, but it felt clean. I took a deep breath, looking out at the endless horizon of the city. I didn't know exactly what my life was going to look like tomorrow, but for the first time in 3 years, it was going to be real. And sometimes, the only way to build a new life is to let the old one burn.